The next category of special rules that we'll talk about is based on Installment Credit Agreements, basically, or ICAs. So there are special rules that will also arise if we have a situation where a transaction is deemed to be an ICA. So the requirements for you to basically figure out as to whether a particular transaction or situation gives rise to an ICA. The first part of it is that within the actual requirements, because I would likely not want to write down the requirements of what an ICA is, because some of the work we should be doing ourselves, so it's quite a bit to actually dot it down because we're already doing so much. So, but just to actually give you like starting points of actually just dissecting to see if we're dealing with an ICA, there are unique features that are prevalent within an ICA. Like for starters, the first point that you should be looking out for is that an ICA would rather be a finance lease or an operating lease, or it can be an installment credit agreement in terms of so just be careful that, just be aware that in terms of there being a lessee and a lessor, so there you'll be talking about a finance lease or even if it's an operating lease. But just to basically paint a picture in terms of the actual requirements of actually working out to see if you likely have an ICA, is that the first point that you should be thinking about is that there would likely be installments that are made. Installments that are made to the actual purchaser as per the contract terms. So there'll be installments made based on the future determined amount that would have been agreed between the actual seller and the actual buyer as well. And the ICA we're focusing on in this regard is just between a seller and a buyer. So there'd be a determined amount that is agreeable in terms of payments in the form of installments being made. These installments will come in the form of cash, of course, irrespective of how those are transacted within stipulated terms within the contract. That could be on a monthly basis based on what the agreements are as per the contract of the ICA. And these installments would also include finance charges. And so we've got like determined value to be paid as stipulated as the future price. So this determined value is paid over in the form of having to pay installments as per the agreed contract. These installments will also include payments of interest or finance charges that will also be paid over. Over and above this, you need to make a comparison in terms of the amounts paid in the aggregated form, be it the installments, including the finance charges, aggregated as the contract term, in terms of whatever the contract term is. If it's for 3 years, you aggregate all those installments, including the finance charges payable, and you compare that aggregated amount of your installments, your finance charges to the cash value. And if that aggregated amount of your installments and your finance charges is in aggregate greater than the cash value, you most likely have an ICA. And the other part that between the seller and the buyer is that upon any defaults that are made in terms of the contract terms, and maybe the buyer somehow defaults, the actual seller is entitled to the return of those goods, and and as well the seller on the one hand also has the right of enjoyment of the benefit to those goods. So those are the requirements that would likely be characteristics of your ICA so far as a buyer and a seller is concerned, right? So I hope you have that picture. Let's go to an ICA that would likely be comprising of a finance lease or an operating lease. In this instance, we now have a lessor and a lessee ICA transacting with each other. So the lessor would have come into an agreement with the lessee in terms of payments that have to be made. There would have been a determined value as well, and there would have been installments that are payable, and there would have been finance charges that are also payable. So all these 4 points are very common to what we spoke about with the seller and the buyer ICA. The only change in this regard is that if with an ICA relating to a finance lease or an operating lease, if there are any defaults and stuff like that, there would be different treatments. I'm not too certain as to the treatment is not really too weighted with me right now at this particular instance. However, there's a slight difference. There's a slight difference that you likely have to be aware of. And however, the one other difference is that the lessee gets to have full benefits of the actual goods that are actually rented over to or leased over to him for at least a period of 12 months, And as to the last point, it's a fine difference, but it's not too important. So you need to also have these points very prevalent. So if I may just maybe paint a clear picture as I did with the sale and buyer ICA, we need to have installments that are based on the determined value, which is a payable value in the future. You need to have installments over and above that. In terms of installments being paid, we need to have finance charges also being paid over, as in like the first case. And the determined value, or the cash value actually, must be the actual payments that are made in aggregate, be it your installments and your finance charges in aggregate, compared with the cash value of the actual goods that are basically being leased out. They would be greater to the actual cash value of those goods. Then you most likely as well have a finance or an operating lease in that instance. So those are the characteristics that you have to be very mindful about. However, this is also work that you should also be doing in your own regard as well, because like this is well documented in legislature as well, and that's what we're basically talking about so far as an ICA. So once you have these hints and these requirements within your midst, you are well equipped now to tackle a question in having to understand as to whether you have an ICA or not. Now we will get into the conversation as to what the value of supply is and what the time of supply is, because that's why we have to basically make sure that you are well versed in understanding the characteristics that are prevalent within an ICA. Once you've got those requirements well versed within your thinking cap, you're well poised to actually tackle an ICA question, which will likely start off with the special rules, helping us with the time of supply and with the value of supply as well, once we've gotten to understand the picture of an ICA that we've just